Welcome back to Nerd News Today. I'm Matthew, and my hands are slowly losing feeling. This might have been a mistake to do. So as you guys saw, today we are talking about CM Punk's return to professional wrestling. And in particular, the top 5 guys in the company I want to see him wrestle right away. CM Punk left WWE on not so great terms quite some time ago, and folks are wondering when, if ever, he would return to professional wrestling. Along came AEW, the current disruptor in the professional wrestling industry, especially on TV. And they came along and said, hey, we're going to start signing all the people that WWE's been letting go. We're going to try and bring back all sorts of other legends, bring all the best guys from the indies together in one spot, and also break down the forbidden door and work with other companies. And folks have been dying for AEW to get their hands on CM Punk forever, and somehow they managed to do it. And I'm sure we're going to get more details over the next few days about how this all came together, but man, I am excited for CM Punk, but I've also got a little bit of trepidation that I'm going to talk about in this video. But more importantly, I do want to talk about who I want to see him go face-to-face with in 2021, in 2022, and beyond. And I'm talking about the top 5 wrestlers I want to see him get in the ring with and have a match, hopefully, before this year is over. But first, I want to give you guys my reaction to seeing CM Punk come out, and it was quite emotional. As soon as that music hit, I was freaking out. I was marking out real hard. You know, I was basically wondering what they were going to do about his music, and we know that Tony Khan has been really trying to get actual music here and there when possible. And for CM Punk, you had to get Cult of Personality, and he got it. And I'm so happy he did it, because the minute that came on, crowd was freaking out, I was freaking out, everybody around the world was freaking out at that moment. And clearly so was CM Punk, because he was extremely emotional walking down to that ring. It felt very genuine. And that's kind of what I want to actually discuss in particular with his return is, you know, while I am a CM Punk fan, I was never like a huge CM Punk fan. And I was really quite hurt with the way he left the industry. And that put a very sour taste in my mouth. So let's kind of take a step back in time to talk about why he left a little bit. And, you know, as Jim Ross always likes to say on his podcast, it's about 2 things, cash and creative. And for the most part, this was one of those things that came down to creative. The story was that CM Punk was not too happy with Batista taking his place in WrestleMania, or just coming in general, being a part-timer and taking this really big spot and taking it away from other folks who are in the company, who have been in the company and are working their butts off 365 days a year. It's a very understandable complaint, but the fact is, as far as I'm concerned, he took the ball and went home with it, and that I didn't really like as much. And this is at a time when WWE was, you know, a little bit different from how it is today. Well, actually very different from how it is today. I mean, this was at a time where WWE was the place to be. You had no other options. If you left WWE, you were a madman. And CM Punk, like I said, he had enough and he left. And not only did he leave, he then went on Colt Cabana's podcast to talk trash about the company and basically kind of vent a little bit. And for better or worse, it was the thing that happened, and then CM Punk kind of just disappeared for a while. So everybody was wondering at that point what he would do next. Would he go back to Ring of Honor? Would he go to Impact? Would he just do whatever the heck he wanted? And as it turns out, he decided to do whatever the heck he wanted. And this is when, in my opinion, also soured him a little bit more. Because, yeah, while we just talked about the creative element of CM Punk wanting to leave WWE, I think there was probably some cash involved too. Because the next thing that CM Punk would do was to join the UFC. And in my opinion, that was one of the biggest mistakes of his career. So I get it. CM Punk wanted to do MMA. He wanted to try his hands out at actual combat sports, getting in the ring and having an actual match, and not having a pro wrestling match. That's fine. A lot of guys have done that. The problem with me was how he did it. And oddly enough, it actually goes back to a parallel with Batista. And Batista decided he wanted to try his hand at mixed martial arts also. So what's the difference between what CM Punk did versus what Batista did? Well, CM Punk went straight to Dana White, got a match in the UFC, and unfortunately kind of humiliated himself in the process. Now, the UFC made a ton of money, and I'm sure CM Punk made a ton of money also, but the problem is Punk lost very decisively, and that was it for his UFC career and his MMA career. Basically, up until this point, he'd been commentating with CFFC in Atlantic City, but he hadn't been competing at all since that one match he had in the UFC. Now, as for Batista, when he decided to try his hand at MMA, he went to a local company in Florida to try it out. He had a match there against a local guy, and it was not the prettiest of matches either, but he did manage to win somehow. Somehow is the important key word here. But he did it on a much smaller stage. And I think that's important to note because basically both of these guys had similar expertise in MMA, which is very, very little. And it's one thing to do lots of training, which both guys did. CM Punk has a Muay Thai background, Batista does a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But it's a completely other thing once you actually get into a cage, lock that door behind you, and get into a proper match. And basically both guys kind of got exposed for being noobs. The difference is CM Punk got exposed on the biggest stage in the world for mixed martial arts. Batista was on a much smaller, much more intimate stage. And I'm sure he didn't get paid nearly as much as CM Punk did, because for him it wasn't really about the pay. It wasn't about the payday whatsoever. It was just about getting that experience in there, seeing what it was like, and really helping out that smaller promotion he was in, because that definitely put them on the map a little bit. So that's what really bugged me in particular about CM Punk at that phase in his life, because yeah, he basically said money is more important than pro wrestling. I want to make money with the UFC. Batista just went off and did his own thing and had fun. And to me, that's kind of what it feels like. But to kind of address some of the points that CM Punk made in his promo on Friday night, one of the first things he did was address folks like me who were very skeptical about this and maybe a little bit angry with CM Punk for what he did when he left and how he left. And basically he said that he just wasn't really in the right mental place, the right emotional place to conduct himself in WWE. And I imagine a lot of that probably carried over into his time in the UFC also. He was probably still trying to figure himself out, see what he wanted to do, test his options. And at the end of the day, pro wrestling was always his passion and what he wanted to do. So, if he's in a better place mentally in his life now, then I want him back in pro wrestling, and I'm so glad he's in AEW. But that does come with a caveat for me, because at the end of the day, this is pro wrestling. Let's all be serious here. And CM Punk, as much as a lot of fans will want to say he is the holy savior of professional wrestling, he is going to bring things back to the way they were, the purest form of art that is pro wrestling. No. Let's not forget here right now, CM Punk is currently in a new TV show on Starz with Stephen Amell, all about pro wrestling. It just happened to have debuted, about a week before his time in AEW. How convenient. And it's really hard to ignore how very hard AEW was pushing that t-shirt from the minute CM Punk opened up his jacket and showed that thing off to everybody. There was blatant shots of that t-shirt. The minute that happened, I think everybody in the world knew that shirt was about to be on sale, and little did we know it would be probably the fastest selling t-shirt in AEW history. And by the way, if you don't know, that t-shirt basically crashed Pro Wrestling Tees and Shop AEW simultaneously. So I've been told there are more shirts coming. It's not going to be that difficult to get, but that thing is just constantly selling out. And on eBay, that thing is going for a ton of money right now. So, hey, don't go on eBay. Wait until they restock that thing, because it's going to get restocked. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's creative and cash, as Jim Ross always says. And I think AEW is one of those places where CM Punk will be able to get both of those things. He's going to get a huge payday. He's probably going to get a front office job as well. He's going to get some sweet merchandising money. He's going to get an action figure, I'm sure, very quickly, because Jeremy Fedauer has already asked fans if they want him to fast-track a CM Punk figure, and the answer is a resounding hell yeah. But I think the major difference between what CM Punk is doing now versus back then, with that whole cash part of his problems, is that, yeah, he does have the passion back in him again. I think that spark has been lit inside him again. He clearly has always wanted to do this. He's always wanted to be a pro wrestler in his heart. So, he's here. He's found the great home to get everything he wants, and hopefully if he can stay happy, that means we're going to get the best CM Punk we've ever seen, and that is what really excites me. It excites me so much that I was foolish enough to do this to my hands, and I am slowly losing feeling in my fingers still as this goes on, so maybe I should try to wrap this up a little bit faster. So after CM Punk cut his promo, we got right down to business, and we already know who his first opponent will be, and that's going to be Darby Allin at AEW All Out on September 5th on pay-per-view. So of course the hot question on everybody's mind is, can CM Punk still go? Well, if anybody is using that Starz show that CM Punk is in as a base for that, apparently he's in great shape. I mean, he looked to be in great shape as well on TV. So the question is, can he keep up with Darby Allin? And we're going to see. And Darby is an excellent first opponent too, because he is young, he is fast, he's going to definitely throw a lot at Punk. It's going to be a true litmus test of what his abilities are right now. And AEW's transparent booking is not going to fail us here in this case either. We know that CM Punk is going to go over, but what really matters is that Darby is going to get the rub working with a guy like CM Punk. I mean, look at Darby right now, man. He's got Sting on his shoulder. He's got CM Punk in the ring in a few weeks. That's some pretty high praise right there for that guy. But as Goldberg would say, who's next? And thankfully it's not Goldberg. Talk about part-timers who shouldn't be back in the ring. Yikes. But yeah, who is going to be next for CM Punk? And that's what I want to talk about, because I got a little short list of who I want to see him go face-to-face with. And I wanted this list to be something that's very fresh and very all-elite. Because, we know that CM Punk has faced a lot of guys that are currently in the company already years ago. And while I do want to see him wrestle these guys again, I can wait on a lot of this. We already know that Cody Rhodes has wrestled CM Punk, but that was a long time ago, and that was a very different Cody Rhodes. And we already know that Chris Jericho had an amazing WrestleMania match with CM Punk. And to be quite honest, I want to see Cody take on CM Punk, but I really don't want to see him do Jericho again. If I was going to see CM Punk versus Jericho, I think that needs to be a TV match and not a pay-per-view match. I think that would do amazing ratings on TV. And Punk has already faced Christian. He's already faced Jake Hager, previously as Jack Swagger. And he already has taken on Jon Moxley, previously as Dean Ambrose. There might be one or two other guys. I don't really think that's too many there. If we're counting Mark Henry and Big Show, maybe we'll do that too. But in terms of active guys, that's pretty much the big names who he's already faced years ago. And I would like to see CM Punk take on all those guys again, because they're all so different now. But I want to focus on the younger guys, the new roster, the new crop of talent that CM Punk has never been in the ring with ever. So here's my top 5 opponents for CM Punk in, let's say, the next year for AEW. So number 5 on this list is Penta El Zero M. Zero Miedo, of course. I love Penta. I've become a big fan of his since watching him on AEW. I've seen all the stuff in Lucha Libre previously to this, but in AEW he's really had some time to shine and really stand out. Same with Rey Fenix, but I think Penta would be really cool to work with, because he's got such a great style that I think would fit very well with CM Punk. And for me, that's kind of the big thing here, is not just finding guys who I like, but guys who are going to meld well with CM Punk's style, or what we've seen of his style. Because again, it's been a long time since he's been in the ring. We don't know what's changed, what's going to be different. But based on what we know from his style from when we last saw him in the ring, I think Penta El0M is going to give him a very exciting match. More so, it's going to be very entertaining because Penta knows how to really play with the crowd, and so does Punk. So I think those two guys, and the way they work in different styles but similar ideas, can meld together very well and have a very exciting, very interesting, and unique kind of matchup. And number 4 for me would actually be another member of the Death Triangle, or whatever they're calling their parallelogram this week, and that would be Pac. Formerly known as Neville, he basically missed out on Punk's time in WWE when he was competing. So these two guys, I think, would have a really hard-hitting, wonderful match. They both have excellent-looking strikes. They both have great mat skills. It will be a very exciting technical match to take a look at, and also still very exciting. I mean, these guys can really control the pace. They can have it be mat wrestling on the ground. They can take it onto their feet and start kicking the crap out of each other. They can both do some top rope things, which would be very cool too. I think they would have a really, really exciting match. I'd love to see these two guys go at it. That would just be such a really great, fast-paced, knockout, brawl kind of match. And when I say brawl, I don't mean like Jon Moxley headbutts and punching and kicking nonstop. I mean like these two guys are going to have a proper scrap of two technical wrestlers that can do everything on the ground and on their feet. And that is what I want to see. And that brings us to number 3. And number 3 would be actually probably my favorite guy in AEW right now, or at least one of my favorite guys. There's a lot in there, but that is Kenny Omega. I am a huge, huge mark for Kenny Omega. And who does not want to see Kenny Omega take on CM Punk? Omega is at the top of his game right now. He's been doing some amazing work with everybody he works with. And yeah, it's a no-brainer that him and Punk have to have a face-to-face at some point in the ring. And when that happens, it is going to be amazing. Again, we're talking about guys who use some awesome strikes in their arsenal. You've got the V-trigger with Kenny Omega. You've got the GT. Well, yeah, I don't know what he's going to call it yet, but you got CM Punk's finish or whatever he might rename it to, as well as the fact that he has his Muay Thai arsenal. You're going to have some great strikes, just like we were talking about with the Pac match. And also excellent grappling and excellent storytelling. This is something I really want to see because these two guys are absolute masters of that craft and both very passionate about pro wrestling. So I think they're going to have a very exciting match. And I want to see that. It's going to be really fun. I'm sure it can be lots of different things too. And that actually to me is the big thing here, is the different things, because Kenny Omega in particular is such a diverse wrestler. He can really do any kind of match and make it good. He can do any style of storytelling in a match and make it amazing. And that's why I think him and Punk could really have not just one great match, but an excellent series of matches with no single one being the same. And if you disagree with me on that, just take a look at Kenny Omega's library of matches and who he's worked with and who he's worked with repeatedly, and he can have a different match every single time with someone. And you know, that's the mark of a true excellent pro wrestler. Do something different each time. And I'm not just talking about a symbol move or things like that. I'm talking about stories they tell in the ring, and Omega is such an excellent foil for what CM Punk brings to the ring. My number 2 for this list would be Andrade El Idolo. That might surprise everybody that CM Punk and Omega is actually number 3, and you're going to probably be really surprised at number 1, but Andrade is my number 2 pick because, again, I'm going back to styles make money and styles make fights. And Andrade is one of those guys that is very excellent. You know, I feel like he hasn't gotten a chance to really show his full potential when he was in WWE. In AEW, he's going to really get that chance to truly shine. And he is also such an excellent heel. You know, I didn't really mention that as much with Omega. And I think typically with CM Punk in AEW, he's going to be playing babyface for a long time. I don't think we're going to get heel CM Punk anytime soon. So in terms of being babyface Punk, Andrade is another excellent foil to Punk. You couldn't ask for a better heel in AEW right now, besides my number 1 pick we'll get to in a few moments. But in terms of skill, but in terms of technique, and in terms of just melding well with what Punk brings to the ring, again, Andrade is another excellent entry. I would love to see these guys meet. You know, it's one of those matches that I wish would have happened sooner, but Punk has been out of wrestling for so long. But the fact is, now we can get it, and it can be a very amazing 5-star match for sure. Now, before we get to my number 1 pick, I do have 5 honorable mentions, and I could have just done a top 10, but I don't really think I needed to in this case. My 5 honorable mentions, in not necessarily any order, would be Ethan Page, Scorpio Sky, Ricky Starks, Shawn Spears, and Sammy Guevara. CM Punk has never wrestled any of these guys, and they would all be excellent, I think, in the ring with him. Again, I think these are matches that are probably going to be better suited for television than pay-per-view, because that's also kind of what I'm thinking of here, is who can sell a pay-per-view with CM Punk. Those guys would stand out really wonderfully on TV. They'd get the rub from Punk as well. Even if they lost, they would still look excellent in the process. You know, Ethan Page almost made this list actually as well, but I like him a lot. There's guys who I like more in this case with CM Punk, but those 5, I cannot wait to see them get in the ring with too. So what is my number 1 choice for CM Punk? Well, this might surprise you a little bit, but it is Malachi Black. Why do I want to see Malachi Black before those other 4 guys get a chance to face him in the ring? Well, that's because I think Malachi Black has the best style to meld with him. And I keep using that word meld, but I really think, you know, styles make fights. and CM Punk and Malachi Black have a lot of similarities that would go excellently together in a ring. I've already talked a lot about guys working with him who have great strikes, and Malachi Black's arsenal is all about the Muay Thai. And the fact is, his kicks are his finisher also. And, these guys both having their sort of martial arts backgrounds, I think that would be such a very cool clash to have. And I was thinking, what I would have liked to have seen from Punk's debut on Friday night. And one of the ideal situations that was running through my mind that I knew wouldn't happen, because obviously Punk had to talk first and cut the promo and basically get the welcome back. But I would have loved it if Punk shows up, he does the whole entrance, walks around the ring, is hugging, he's crying, he gets in there, he grabs a mic, he's taking it all in, and then the ring goes black. Who pops up behind him? Malachi Black kicks him in the head. That's the segment. Tell me that would not have been a powerful segment to see that happen. The biggest star, the biggest sign to come to AEW, and he gets knocked the F out right away. You could argue that that would immediately be hurting Punk's stature in the company. Yes and no. I mean, I guess that would be in the case, though. He'd then be going to a program right away with Malachi Black, which he's not. In this case, they've decided to go with Darby Allin. That's a good choice. But I would love to see in the future Malachi Black just come in there, knock his head off, and begin a really great hard-hitting feud. And that's the thing here. This would not be like a Kenny Omega match. This would not be like an Andrade match. This would really be like none of the other matches we talked about. In that, yeah, they have a great technical match, but this would be much more like a real fight in a lot of ways. And I think that would work really well. Typically, when you combine MMA with pro wrestling, the results always fall short. They're terrible, quite honestly. I think the best version we've ever had of this match would be like Samoa Joe and Kurt Angle back in TNA. And what made their matches great was the fact that they combined real mixed martial arts things with pro wrestling. You can't really just have it be a strict MMA style match. It's going to be terrible. Look at Jake Hager and Wardlow not a few months ago. In fact, that was in AEW. That was okay, but it looked kind of silly in the cage. It just, it could have been done better. I think if you get someone like Malachi Black with CM Punk to have a match that's a little more based in reality, you could have a true 5-star, maybe even a 6-star match coming out of AEW between those two guys. I mean, yeah, Kenny Omega is the king of the 5-star matches. And Malachi Black hasn't really had his chance to get that moment yet, but I think with a guy like CM Punk, he could really elevate himself and truly show off what he's capable of, because we know that Malachi Black is capable of a lot more than we saw him do in WWE. And, I kind of go back to like the matches that he had with Buddy Murphy. And I could see the match with CM Punk being similar, but definitely being a lot better because Punk's expertise is, a little bit more than Buddy Murphy. And I'm not trying to disparage Buddy Murphy at all. I hope that he can show up in AEW or in Impact Wrestling. He'll make a big impact no matter where he goes. No pun intended there. But, that's kind of like the on paper, what I see as like what a Punk and Malachi Black match could look like at its most simple level. But when you've got now Malachi Black and CM Punk doing like a main event match that's maybe 30 minutes long, I mean, there is a lot they can do. I think there's a lot of untapped potential in Malachi Black. There's a lot of stuff we haven't seen in Punk yet. And I think those guys can really pull it out of each other in a way that Andrade, in a way that Omega, in a way that Penta and Pac could not do. So that's my hopes for what CM Punk can do in the company. And I don't think Malachi's going to be clashing heads anytime soon with Punk, because he's basically right now kind of running through the roster, just beating up people a little aimlessly, it feels like at the moment, waiting for Cody to kind of come back. And that's going to be many, many months from now, which is a whole other video. But yeah, I mean, basically at this point, Malachi is kind of spoken for, but I would love it if by the end of this current 12-month span, from basically this August to next August, if by the next All Out in 2022, it's Malachi Black and CM Punk. That, to me, would be a really amazing match, because we've got one of the hottest names in pro wrestling in CM Punk with one of the biggest up-and-comers, and really, no matter who won or lost that match, it wouldn't make a difference, but if Malachi Black won that one, his stock would go up even bigger than it already is. So that is my top 5 opponents for who I want to see CM Punk wrestle in AEW in the next year, but you let me know what your top 5 are in the comments below. I want to hear it. Let's discuss. CM Punk's got a lot of potential opponents now, and there's a lot of awesome matches he can have. What do you want to see him do next? So until next time, I'm Matthew. This has been Nerd News Today, and most importantly, CM Punk is all elite.